Welcome to the Blanco Wellness Podcast. Thank you for being here. Take a breath, settle in, and let's talk today about something that most people have felt in their bodies, but have never had a framework to understand. When grief arrives, real grief, the kind that comes from genuine loss, it does not stay in the mind. It moves into the body. The chest becomes heavy. Breathing changes, becoming shallower or more effortful, as though something is sitting in the center of the rib cage that was not there before. Deep sighs escape without being consciously produced. Sometimes it becomes genuinely difficult to draw a full breath. Most people have experienced this, and most people have simply accepted it as the physical expression of emotional pain, a side effect, something the body does while the mind processes. Traditional Chinese medicine offers a more precise and more interesting account. This is not a side effect. The lungs and grief are specifically and meaningfully connected, an understanding that connection opens something useful about how grief actually moves through us and what it needs in order to complete itself. In the TCM organ system, each organ is associated not only with its physiological functions, but with particular emotional qualities. The specific range of feeling that flows through that organ's energetic territory when the system is healthy, and that becomes problematic when the system is under stress or blocked. The liver holds anger and the capacity for assertion. The kidneys hold fear and the deep reserves of vital energy. The heart holds joy and the quality of genuine connection. The lungs hold grief, sadness, and what TCM describes as the capacity for Po. The corporeal soul, the aspect of consciousness most directly tied to the physical body and to our experience of loss and ending. This is not metaphor dressed as physiology. It is an observation, refined across millennia, about a real relationship between a particular organ system and a particular range of human experience. The connection becomes clear when you consider what the lungs actually do. Every breath is a complete cycle of receiving and releasing, in and then out, with no breath held indefinitely, and no exhale suppressed permanently. The body requires both movements in continuous alternation from birth until the last breath. And grief asks something structurally identical, to receive the reality of what has been lost, to feel its full weight, and then, not quickly, not on anyone else's schedule, but eventually, to release. Not to forget, not to stop loving, but to allow the held thing to move, the way the held breath must move, because holding forever is not sustainable and release is not betrayal. What makes grief so physically exhausting is partly this. The part of us that does not want to accept the loss is, in a very real sense, holding the exhale, resisting the release. The chest tightens because something in us is bracing against a reality it did not choose and does not want to confirm through the act of letting go. This is not weakness. It is love expressing itself in the only language available to it when the person or the future or the chapter it was oriented toward is no longer accessible. The body is doing something coherent. It is simply doing it at a cost that compounds over time if the holding is sustained indefinitely. The Taoists observed that nature never holds on. The trees do not argue with autumn, do not resist the falling of leaves or attempt to maintain the fullness of summer into October. They release completely and without apparent grief because release is part of the cycle. Because what falls away creates the conditions for what comes next. This is not a counsel toward emotional suppression or the performance of acceptance before genuine acceptance has arrived. Grief has its own timeline, its own wisdom, its own pace that cannot be hurried from the outside without cost. The Taoist observation is something different. That the movement through grief, when it eventually comes, is not a betrayal of love, but an expression of the same natural intelligence that governs everything that lives. To eventually exhale is not to have loved less. It is to have loved honestly. Tears are worth naming here specifically because they are one of the most consistent mechanisms through which the body processes grief and restores the movement that holding interrupts. There is something observably true about what happens after genuine weeping. A quality of physical release, a slightly different quality of breath, a settling that was not present before. Many cultures have understood this intuitively, structuring ritual, weeping, and communal mourning as deliberate parts of the healing process rather than private embarrassments to be managed. The body's instinct to cry in grief is not weakness requiring control. It is the lung system doing what it knows how to do, moving what was stuck, returning rhythm to what had become held. Healing from grief is not the erasure of love or the forgetting of what was lost. It is the gradual return of movement, the restoration of the natural cycle of receiving and releasing that grief temporarily interrupts. Memory remains. Love remains. What gradually changes in genuine healing is the quality of the holding. It becomes lighter. The breath moves more freely through it. The future feels accessible again in ways that it did not when the grief was at its most acute. This is not distance from what was lost. It is integration, the absorbed experience of loss becoming part of the person who lived through it, carried differently, less as a weight that prevents movement and more as a depth that informs it. If you are carrying grief today, fresh or old, acknowledged or long suppressed, I want to leave you with the simplest possible thing. Take one slow breath, all the way in with genuine intention, and then release it, all the way out, completely. Not as a solution, not as a cure, simply as a small act of giving the body what it knows how to do and trusting that the same intelligence that moves the breath knows, in its own time and its own way, how to move the grief as well. The breath knows how to move, and so, given enough time and enough gentleness, does the heart. Thank you for being here with me today. Until next time, be well.